'Twas on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost accounted for agony, I collected the instruments of life around me that I might infuse the spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out. When by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. Well, hi, Jakey Steve here, the long-haired freaky dude. Today I'm going to review the root of all horror, Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, by Marry Shelley. Okay, maybe not the first horror, but it definitely popularized the genre Gothic literature. A close brother to horror. Now, I thought this was a fantastic book, but I think that there are 2 things which you should bear in mind. First, it's not the mainstream Frankenstein that we have come to know thanks to horribly incorrect movies. Don't get me wrong, they're great movies, but they're only very loosely based on the book. It's not the big dumb green guy with bolts sticking out of his head roaming around wreaking havoc. I mean, his name isn't even Frankenstein. Frankenstein is the name of the creator. In this book, the monster doesn't even have a name. He's just called the monster. Now, if you've watched the TV series on Showtime Penny Dreadful, I actually think their representation of Frankenstein's monster and Frankenstein are actually very close to the book. I think it's kind of a perfect representation of the 2, and those are the faces which I actually kept in mind while reading through this book. That's who I pictured them as. The monster in the book and the TV series is sort of this pale, pasty guy with jet black hair, sort of combed over, and he's very calm, very tranquil. And not to mention the monster is incredibly smart. But it's just this calmness which makes him horrifying in the book and the TV series. It's not his just raw rage. He kills people calmly, and he's aware of it. He knows what he's doing, and I think that makes it somewhat more horrifying. So the Penny Dreadful guy, he sort of looks like this. A little more like this. No, sort of got that Marilyn Manson look there. This is who I picture whenever I think of Frankenstein's monster. And second, it's definitely not horror as we know it by today's standards. It's not jump scary like Stephen King style books. It's more of a psychological, philosophical thriller. Now, this book actually starts off with the letters of a captain exploring the Arctic, near the North Pole. This guy in the ship comes across this guy in a sled attached to frozen dogs. Malamutes! Ugh, the horror. Those poor puppy dogs. I mean, in my opinion, that's the saddest part of the book right there. Poor puppy dogs. But this guy then proceeds to tell Captain Walton why it is he is in the freaking North Pole in the first place. Tells him his life story and all of the events that lead up to him being in that frozen spot. Turns out this guy is Victor Frankenstein. So we have this guy, Victor Frankenstein, who had an otherwise perfect life. Great family, money, and a burning passion to explore the sciences. At college, he gets the idea to create a human being pretty much from scratch, but unfortunately the details of which are spared. The intense grave robbing, the life by lightning, all of that stuff just isn't in the book, which I think are great additions to the movies. Because, you know, we want to see what's going on. We want to see the horror and the gore and all the guts and the blood coming together. And unfortunately, neither is the creepy guy Igor in there. He's completely a creation of the shows. Sorry, Bela Lugosi and Daniel Radcliffe. Love Igor, but he's not in the book. I wonder if he's sort of loosely based off of Victor's friend in the book, Henry Clerval. Victor's really formal, very smart, and he's definitely aware of the finer points of debauchery. He's not savage or crazy. Quite the contrary. You know, not the crazy guy you see in the movies. It's alive! He just doesn't do that, nor is he that excited about his creation. He just wants to explore science. Once Victor fulfills his goals of life creating, he is immediately filled with regrets and runs away from his creation, leaving the newborn, fully grown monster, as he's called, alone. Nowhere to go. It's kind of sad. This monster, he's scary looking, he's big, he's got abnormal features, he's got scars on his face. He can endure a lot, and he's a lot stronger than a normal human. He was made to survive. And because of this, normal humans, shudder at his appearance. They turn away in horror. Even the monster's own creator ran away from him. He had no one to look up to, no one to teach him how to live. He actually hides under someone's house for a whole year to study how humans behave, how they act, and how they talk. He learns how to read, he learns cultural norms, and he's finally ready to try to enter the human world. But when he does, people still scream in horror. The monster, he's become very formal, very moral, very intelligent. He's a very cool, calm, collected guy. All he wants is love. He just wants to be loved by some humans. But no one will love him in return. He turns cold and bitter and decides to exact revenge on his creator for bringing him into life, and starts by running around chasing him and then killing his family. The monster, he's not crazy or unstable. He is a cool, collected, thought-out murderer. But a murderer nonetheless. And I think that makes him kind of more horrifying, because he's aware of what he's doing and he enjoys it. Coolly. I mean, if I was being killed by someone who's just like rageful, like, I would get that. I mean, the guy's rageful. But whenever it's calm, like Hannibal Lecter calm, whoo, chills run up your spine. One big inner debate one faces while reading this book is, who is the bad guy? The line, it's not always that clear. I personally think a great argument could be made for either the monster or Victor Frankenstein. And I also think a different argument could be made depending on which part of the book we're dealing with. I think that's what makes this book a phenomenal read, is because the characters aren't obdurate. They're far from obdurate. They're constantly changing, always adapting to new situations. And in a way, I think the Monster and Frankenstein kind of switch roles throughout the book. And yet, in another way, they kind of follow the same path. Victor, he starts out with a content scientist with much hope for his future endeavors. The monster, he pretty much starts out with a content life, hoping for a future fitting into human society. They both work really hard towards their goal, and the moment that both faces their goal, the very moment that both face their goal, it is thrown back into their face and smashed. Victor is filled with regret, and the monster is filled with revenge. Now at this point, it's very easy to sympathize with the monster the first that we hear of him. He sounds like a really nice guy who just wants love. But he was abandoned by Victor and never shown how to live, how to fit in. And with all respect, the monster does learn in time. But he has no one to help infuse him into society, to help people get used to his strange appearance. The monster once saved a child while drowning, and he was shot for doing so because of the way he looked. I mean, he saved this man's child and he was shot for it. How horrible is that? This made the monster very bitter towards all humans. This was then the reward of my benevolence. I had saved a human being from destruction, and as recompense I now wreathed under the miserable pain of a wound which shattered the bone and flesh. So it's kind of easy to see where this rage is coming from. Not a single person has treated the monster kindly. He's kind of like an abused dog in a way. It doesn't necessarily excuse what he does in the future, but it does make his situation more sympathetic and heartbreaking. When the monster and the creator meet for the first time, it's Victor who's crazy and angry, and the monster who is cool and collected, despite him being the one who wants revenge. In a way, I suppose Victor kind of wants revenge on the monster for the agony that he has caused, the mental anguish, but Victor's mental anguish pales in comparison to the monster's mental anguish. So, again, we sort of see that swapped role thing. The monster is the killer, the monster is the one seeking revenge, and yet he is the sane one. Victor has internal regrets for only hurting himself, and yet he is the one who is off the leash. So, looking at this mental anguish, it's really kind of fascinating and psychologically horrifying. But as the monster does more and more damage, Victor's inner regrets turn into revenge towards the monster. And by the end of the novel, it seems even their central roles have switched. By the end, the monster is the god, and the creator is the one who is controlled. At one point, Victor even calls the monster omnipotent. And the monster is so arrogant to say, "You are my creator, but I am your master." So, in the end, I don't think the monster and Victor are really all that different. In the middle of the book, Victor went crazy with the idea that he was the monster, and in the end, I don't think he was too far from the truth. But that works both ways. I don't think the monster was too far off from being Victor either. In the end, Victor's only reason to live is to track down the monster and kill it. In the end, the monster's only reason to live is to keep Victor alive for as long as possible, to prolong the anguish and the inner suffering for all that he has lost. So, it's kind of funny that they both need each other in order to live. In the end, when one dies, so does the other. Perhaps it's not necessarily confirmed that the monster dies. Victor definitely dies, but the monster, he sort of just dives into the ocean and disappears into the cool black night. Now, something which I thought was curious is that both, at one point in the book, refer to themselves as the devil. Both Victor and the monster call themselves, or relate themselves to, Satan. Like the archangel who aspired to omnipotence, I am chained to eternal hell. So again, that tied together thing. Now, Marry Shelly, she is a fantastic writer. Not only is her mastery of narrative beautifully poetic, I wonder if she got that from her husband, by the way, who was a very famous poet. For example, listen to this. My father saw this change with pleasure, and he turned his thoughts towards the best methods of eradicating the remains of my melancholy, which every now and then would return by fits, and with a devouring blackness overcast the approaching sunshine. Doesn't that just, penetrate your ear holes and fill them with pleasure? But this novel actually gets rather deep. On the surface it seems simple enough. Man makes monster, monster kills man. I sound like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. God creates dinosaur, God destroys dinosaur. God creates man, man destroys God, man creates dinosaur. But there's actually a lot of internal depth there. The characters are definitely more complex than they seem to be. Upon reflection, I can definitely see that. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. As versatile and adaptable as we are, change is always hard. Especially big changes, like your father, your wife, and your best friend since childhood all dying at once type changes. Now that quote was from after the fact, but interestingly, Victor delves on the matter before it happens as well. Before the monster wreaks too much havoc. Nothing is more painful to the human mind than after the feelings have been worked up by a quick succession of events. The dead calmness of inaction and certainty which follows and deprives the soul both of hope and fear. Notice how it sort of became simplified from the original version, from his original views. I mean, Victor, he pretty much words both of these quotes almost the same way. They start out the same way. Nothing is more painful to the human mind than, but the after is different than the before. Sort of, it's more simplified. Pain, in a way, sort of became simpler for him, I suppose. And something else which I thought was interesting, this just in sort of the making of the characters and their mindset. Victor, he was shaped by alchemists and Oriental literature. Not really the most power-crazy people of society. They're more compassionate. When you read the writings, life appears to consist in a warm sun and a garden of roses, in the smiles and frowns of a fair enemy, and the fire that consumes your own heart. How different from the manly and heroical poetry of Greece and Rome. It's funny because that's what the monster wants. He wants warmth and compassion. Yet he is inspired by the Western canon of Greek and Roman literature. Of Greek and Roman power and control. Of heroes and manliness, which is kind of what Victor is. So I think it's interesting here how they sort of are swapped from how they should have come out. The monster was inspired by power, yet he wanted love. And Victor, he wanted power, and yet he was inspired by love. And simply because I'm a proponent of liberal education, here's a quote which I really enjoyed by one of Victor's professors. A man would make but a very sorry chemist if he attended to that department of human knowledge alone. If your wish is to become really a man of science and not merely a petty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of natural philosophy, including mathematics. Things are more tied together than they may seem. It seems that the great advancers in science could always do so because they could see across multiple fields of study and because they could tie them all together and see how they are all tied together. And for morality's sake, come Victor, not brooding thoughts of revenge against the assassin, but with feelings of peace and gentleness that will heal. Instead of festering the wounds of our minds, enter the house of mourning, my friend, but with kindness and affection for those who love you, not with hatred for your enemies. Someone give this man a medal. His son was just murdered, and he's telling his other son, Victor, to not seek out revenge. That's got to take a lot of inner strength. I don't know how he could do it. I like to think that if I were in a similar situation, I would do the same. But I don't know, I know I'd probably go all Rick Grimes on that poor bastard. Anyways, did you find it kind of weird how the father called Victor my friend in that quote? I don't know, just strange. You don't really usually hear a father calling their child, come on my friend. Usually you say son or child or something other than my friend, I don't know. So, my questions to you are you team green and bolty, or are you team pale and pasty? And perhaps the more important question, are you team Victor or are you team Monster? Please feel free to discuss your opinions of these matters in the comments section below. Well, that is my review of Frankenstein by Marry Wollstonecraft. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. If you want to see more book reviews over things such as literature or math or science or history or other great books in general, feel free to check out my channel and hit the subscribe button. And might I suggest checking out the Great Books Challenge. I'm sure it is something that you would love to do. And also, if you want to see other things like headbanging to classical music, or, art time lapses, which are now on my channel, which is kind of cool, feel free to check those out as well. Well, I'm Janky Steve, the long-haired Freaky Stein. Thank you for watching, and be sure to have a great day.